to the cloud.
I was very confused for a second there.
Yeah, I know. It didn't always do that.
Well, there's a fair few people here that said they're going to go. I thought Innovate IT weren't using us anymore.
All right. Thanks, guys, for joining us. We're going to just wait a minute and we'll let everyone join, and then we'll kick off. We'll just probably, I don't know, 1 or 2 past. Yes, this will be recorded. We'll send it out afterwards. Usually takes a couple of days, but we will be doing these regularly as well. That's all right. I mean, you can always book one-on-one training as well. This is just designed as a a bit more of a group one that you can sort of send your text to as well. So this is just in addition to our usual training. Sorry, guys, I'm just answering questions. All right, we'll kick off because we're at 1 minute past. Thank you for joining us. This is our first of our technical workshops. Like I said a second ago, this is in addition to our standard technical training that we do. So you can book with your techs, you can book one-on-one training. Every single one of our staff members has a meeting link in their signature, which you can book technical or sales training. So don't ever hesitate to use this, use those. This is really just in addition on a regular schedule so that you can, send your team along and whatnot. Today's topic, we are covering voice or VoIP fundamentals. So this is really geared at the bits and pieces that you need to think about if you're selling voice as an MSP. We won't get too technical in terms of doing demos and things like that. We are going to do a session next week as well, which we will actually get into our systems. So today is a bit more around the actual VoIP itself. So let me share screen and we'll get into the thick of it. Once I can figure out how to be technical. Present. Zoom. Okay. Can everyone see that?
Yep, it looks like it's coming through.
Cool. I have lost the presenter thing. Oh well. Cool. Okay, so like I said a second ago, we're just going to go through the voice space or VoIP basics, things like number porting. We're going to quickly run through our VoIP product so you understand the differences and whatnot, and we'll go over the highlights of our platform. This is meant to be somewhat interactive, so if you do have any questions, if you want us to address anything particular, just dump it into the chat and we can answer them as we go. Cool. All right, so first things first, before if you're already doing VoIP, you probably already know this, but as, oh, that didn't come up, I didn't know, there we go. As an MSP or anyone that is selling or reselling VoIP, you first of all, you need to make sure that you're registered with the TIO, so the Telecommunications Industry Ombudsman. Now, it is meant to be required. I think it's free to do actually to register online. But if you're not, don't stress too much. You will, if you ever, it's really there just if you ever get any complaints against you to give consumers a path to escalate things, to move things along. Primarily there for the big 4 telcos that are really slow moving. If you ever actually get a complaint, they give you like 2 weeks to actually sign up and things like that as well. But be aware of it at the very least. The next piece of it, I guess, just is from our perspective, you will need to bill your customers, right? It sounds kind of simple. If you're dealing with hosted network, we bill you, you bill your customer. So around that, you do have some ACMA requirements with the details that you need to provide that customer. If you're using our rebilling system, which we'll talk about a little bit later. We provide all of that detail in that, so it's kind of set and forget. But just be aware of that. Most people don't really stress about it too much, but you're meant to sort of be able to give all the breakdowns of calls and minutes and things like that. Now, if you're a hosted network partner, because I know that we've got a few people on here that aren't hosted network partners, we provide the senior support, so level 2 and 3. We expect our partners as resellers to provide that level 1 support. So you are going to have to field those questions from your own customers, do the on-site installation, those sort of bits and pieces of the handset, where we'll help you set it up, we'll provide training, all of those bits and pieces, but your customers are going to call you. We're a purely wholesale organization, so just keep that in mind. There are a number of providers out there that'll give you commissions and things like that. We don't operate under that model. We believe in supporting our partners. You own the relationship, and we have that relationship with yourselves. So pretty straightforward. The TIO one is probably the biggest one there, just to be aware of at the very least. So you don't have to jump and go register straight away, but just be aware of it that you should be looking to tick that box. Cool. All right. So Dylan, I'm going to hand over to you here. So technical considerations for VoIP. These are really just geared to lower your support. Right. So the less support you get, the more money that you're making off the service. Right. And if you set up and you consider some of these things from the word go, you're just setting yourself up for success. Dylan, over to you.
So the very big first one is just going to be purely the reliability of the internet. If you've got a very fast connection, but the latency is through the roof, the VoIP is going to suffer quite a lot because VoIPs are very sensitive to latency. So that's why we normally, if you're in a situation where you have a fast connection but latency is pretty bad, you might want to consider putting in a separate NBN connection like a 25x5, which is more than enough for majority of customers as just a dedicated voice line. Or you could even look at setting up something like quality of service to try and make it so that VoIP traffic is prioritized over anything else. Because at the end of the day, if customer can't make calls outbound or receive calls in a stable manner, business kind of can't run. Most businesses rely on that. The other thing is, it does mention here, but 4G and 5G and not recommended as a primary connection when it comes to VoIP.
Yeah,
that's purely
5G is a good one there, because we've had a few people sort of try to run it over various providers, and it's been sold as the dream, but there's still issues with it. So
yeah, this 5G is fast, but the jitter is terrible. The jitter and latency.
It depends on where you are, your distance to the tower. I guess the piece with that is there's too many factors involved with 4G, 5G, that a fixed line is always the preferred option. You could have a really good fixed point wireless service, but a dedicated connection is the ideal way.
Yeah, and not to mention a lot of 4G, 5G services are double natted, which VoIP does not play well with.
So it means you're going to get like a private IP address. So you think of like Telstra, they're not, if you ever go to like, what is my IP address? That IP address is being shared amongst a bunch of different people, which can cause issues with some voice services.
Which you can get an additional pack from, I know Telstra does it, where you can get an additional pack on top of the SIM card to give you a static IP, but
and that's
it's not always guaranteed.
You'll find all of our connections, even our LTE, they all come with a static IP address, just to avoid that headache completely. Again, if you stick that sort of, if you cost in a 25x5 connection for each of your deployments, you're going to get that static IP address. It's going to be dedicated over that. You're not even going to have to worry about quality of service. It's going to be nice and easy. Do it from the word go, and you're set up for success.
Yeah, exactly. As well as that means, if there is maintenance in the area and it takes off their main service, they can still make phone calls. There's nothing stopping you there. And the other one is probably the most common thing, in some people who've dealt with our support before have had us ask them, is turning off SIP ALG fixes majority of issues. It's supposed to help, but in a lot of cases it causes more problems than it fixes. So usually just turning it off and giving everything a restart helps if you're seeing some weird issues popping up.
Yeah, it's usually just a checkbox in your router.
Yeah.
But some routers don't support it, like the really cheap Soho ones. They won't actually have that option. It's pretty rare. Most of them do, but just be aware of that when you're going into it. Yeah, I think you can use TLS as well, Dylan, to get around that now. Yeah.
Yeah, TLS does work for most cases to get around it if your router doesn't support turning it off.
Yep, cool. Now, if you order any of our voice services, you will get our full guide in our service completion advice. Our knowledge base article has all these bits and pieces in there as well. This is really just, hey, reminder, if you get it right from the word go, your customer is going to be happy. You're going to have a better experience all around.
Yeah, and the last one is just if you use like a UTM or something, you may want to consider whitelisting the SIP servers. So that way they don't have things like deep packet inspection or SSL inspection go through it, because I have seen it in the past where SSL inspection can cause VoIP traffic to fail. Because it, again, is sensitive. It doesn't like being touched halfway through the transfer.
Now, these are obviously a little bit harder to control in the current world that we're living in, people working from home and things like that. So these, I guess, are kind of more geared towards home offices, also not home offices, offices. If you're working from home, UTM, sorry, that's a good question. So Unified Threat Management. So if you've got, someone's just asked what's a UTM, next generation firewall. So if you've got a standard firewall, it's just going to do like port blocking. Is the port open? Is the port closed? Whereas a UTM is kind of it's going to do the smarts of it. It's going to actually look at the traffic and potentially block some of that traffic based on certain patterns. It'll depend on the firewall vendor or the UTM vendor. So we're talking like Fortinet, Cisco, all of those. They're usually like a proper business grade firewall is going to have UTM functionality. And they can cause issues if you whitelist those policies, it'll just avoid some of those headaches for you.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So if you come up with any other questions as we go, feel free to just drop them in the chat. We will move on. So Dylan, run us through and these points up here on the slide are more geared towards end customers. Run us through the actual recommended migration process.
So the first step you're going to want to do, so I'll explain this as if I was doing.
Oh, you've just got muted, Dylan.
Yes, I have. I accidentally hit the spacebar. I explain it as if I was talking to the end customer. So the first thing you would have to do is sit down with them, either get them to explain how their current system works or get them to explain what they want. We're always happy as well as if you get that design and send it through to our support. We can validate it for you. Be like, yes, you can do this. No, you can't. You might want to consider this sort of things.
Yeah, we had one the other day where we picked up a lot of efficiencies, keeping in mind that we do this all day, every day. So, always feel free to leverage us in that sense.
Yeah. So, and once you've got the design all good and you've got everything provisioned in the VoIP portals, if you're using our bundles, very much before switching it over and making anything live, budget for time to allow you to test everything on site with the customer. The amount of times we've had partners send hardware to site and it just doesn't quite work how the customer wants, just because they've either not communicated properly or they've just not really thought to mention that's how they do it on their old system. It's a fair number. So we always recommend putting it on site, test it, weeding out any problems, and then arrange to have your phone number ported to us. At the moment, we've actually got free number porting. Is it till
end of the year? Yeah. So it's not just some providers, we'll cover it a bit later, but some providers have your first number that's free. Some don't, some charge it all. We're offering free number porting across everything. So, it could be one number, it could be 1,000 numbers. We're not charging for that at all at the moment. We're wearing the cost.
And as well, we can give you a temporary number for however long it takes to get ported, so the customer can actually forward their existing one to the new system and then make outbound calls. The people they're calling don't actually have any clue they're using a new phone system. And then once everything's installed and everything's cut over, guiding them through the installation, training them how to use the phones, answering any questions they might have. So that might include just going to site and explaining, okay, this is how you transfer, the basics like that. Because even though their phones might already have very similar functions, everything looks different on the new phones.
Yeah, it's always a good idea to have a leave behind. And if you're using any of the phones that we provide, I think there's a leave behind in our portal that you can print off, stick your logo
Hmm,
on, stick it on the desk. It'll just run them through the basics of the buttons and things like that. But again, if you provide that training and you're going to set them up for success, which means you're going to have less support tickets, a happier customer, and you're going to sleep better at night.
exactly.
I should say that you should typically charge for that as well, right? So if you're going on site, I do see far too often at MSPs or our partners, they're not charging for that installation. You should be charging. I typically recommend, $100, $99 or something like that per phone to go out. Because you've got to set it up, you've got to, take it out of the box, you've got to plug it all in, or one of your techs have to do that. And training that customer, it takes time. So explain that to your customer and add that as a line item on your proposals.
Yeah, and then the last one's just the ongoing support and management of the system. So if they've suddenly encountered a weird issue with the phones, a phone breaks, things like that, and the day-to-day changes if they want to change, say, a time interval or the way the calls flow through the system.
Might have a new user, all of those bits
Yeah,
and pieces. So it's fairly straightforward. We support you every step of the way, regardless. You might also mix some of these up. So your number porting might actually be done, closer to the beginning of the stage, depending on the type of the numbers. So if you're unsure about this, always reach out to our team. We can actually help you plan it out and give you the guidance to make sure that you get it right. And once you've done it a few times, it's pretty. Yes, the leave behind. Sorry, we've just got a question here. Link later to the leave behind. We'll see if we can send it out in an email. It's also in our content hub in our partner portal, so you can just download it from there
Yeah, I'll send it out. It's actually in our knowledge base
as well. Cool.
Oh.
I'll send that to you.
perfect.
Thanks, Maz. Cool. All right. All right, so we're actually talking a little bit about number porting now. So like I said a second ago, number porting can be done at the beginning of the process. But first of all, what is it, right? So local number porting, or LNP, it is the process of taking over a number and effectively updating the database with all the different carriers of where that number now lives, right? So, Telstra actually still have the contract to manage that database, but when we take over a number, we have to coordinate it with the losing provider. The losing provider, then has to approve it. The Telstra database gets updated, or the LNP database gets updated, and then that way it's kind of like routing. If you're changing office, all of a sudden you're changing your like your DNS records or something like that. That process is very manual. Mobile phones is automatic. Unfortunately, for complex services with businesses, they're not. If you're porting over like a PSTN line, a single number, that is automated to a degree in most cases, touch wood. Whereas category C or complex ports are not. They need to be coordinated, so how it works is that we take care of all of that for you, basically. So you don't have to worry about it. You just fill in a form in our portal, and then our team will take care of all of that. And we're just going to schedule a time with you. But in the background, you request it, or sorry, the process overall, you request it. We're going to coordinate that with the various parties. To us, you might submit 500 numbers, and they could be with 5 different providers. We'll coordinate that with the 5 different providers, and then book all the times in with you that you can liaise with the end customer to let them know when that happens. The cutover of those numbers usually takes about 10 minutes. So there's usually about 10 minutes of downtime. Occasionally, there are issues with number porting, and if you've ever done it before, you may have experienced that. And that's because it is a manual process, and it's often reliant on, well, it is reliant on the different parties to update the databases. So occasionally you'll get, say, calls via the Vodafone network not working, or the Optus network not quite working, and we'll work through that. But it's always good to set your customers' expectations, that how it works, what it goes through. In our partner portal, we've got a full white label document that actually runs through the end customer. Again, it's in our content hub. We can probably send that link out as well. And that basically is a document that you can give to your customer to go, hey, this is how it works. This is the terminology, things like that, just to set their expectations. 99% of the time, they'll just, they won't even notice anything. But it's good to let them know that the process and what's going to happen. Now, from our perspective, you just fill in the port form in our partner portal and we'll process the rest. The only thing that we need is proof of ownership over those numbers, right? Now, that can be in the form of a phone bill, or it can be in form of a letter, with a letterhead from the end customer stating that they own the numbers. Now, it is important that you do validate the numbers, that you enter them correctly. We have had a few times in the last sort of, I don't know, 8 years, probably I can count them on one hand, where numbers haven't been validated and even the losing carrier has said, oh, yep, that's fine. And the numbers haven't actually belonged to that customer because they've swapped 2 digits. It's extremely rare, but make sure that you're validating the right information that you submit. Beyond that, timing. So category A for a single number, and again, this document that is in our partner portal explains all of this. Category A, about 7 days usually. Category C, it depends. C for complex. It usually we say 30 to 60 days, but I have seen worst case when we're doing thousands of numbers for like a school, and they've got the old school ISDN services, things like that, where they're really complex, where they've got old school analog port forwards and like forwarding calls and all sorts of things. The worst case I've seen is a year. All right, I've only ever seen that a few times, but it's pretty bloody rare. Most cases are 30 to 60 days around that, and that's why I say, if I go back to the recommended migration process, that if you are doing a new phone system, sometimes depending if they're if they have heaps of old school legacy numbers, we're talking hundreds and hundreds of numbers from ISDN based services, sometimes in those cases it's better that you lodge that right at the beginning, and then we can schedule a time for that cutover to occur, and you can time things a bit better that way. And again, you leverage our team. We're there to work with you to actually coordinate all of that with you. Cool. And again, yep, we've got the free number porting until the end of the year. So
just touching on some of the considerations quickly on that last slide.
Yeah.
When porting numbers, you do want to be careful if they're attached to Optus Loop or Telstra Dot systems.
Good point.
Because those are typically bundled with internet, and if you port those numbers away, it will actually drop both the phone system and the internet connection. Some NBN services are like that. I muted myself again. Some NBN services are like that as well. So you just want to triple check that. It might be best just to grab a bill off them and check if it's bundled or something like that.
It's the same thing with ADSL. If you port the phone number of an underlying ADSL service, not that there's very many ADSL services out there these days, but they still do exist, and they're typically always a category A, so they happen pretty quickly. If you port that number, the ADSL service will stop working. So just be aware of that. And it is reversible, but we've got to do it pretty quickly, and it's painful to get done. So just be aware of that.
That's a good point someone made. We can try and align it so you can port the internet and phone number at the same time, or roughly within the same time period.
Yeah, if you're doing an ADSL service to move to an NBN connection, sometimes what I say is, like, if it's in an office building scenario, they've usually got multiple phone lines in there. So, connecting the NBN on a separate phone line and then porting out the other number. But if they've got one single line, we can install the NBN service on a subsequent line. There is a $350 fee to do that from NBN, but that's an option to minimize any potential headaches. Again, if you're new to it or you've got one of these weird situations, we can actually we'll work with you to sort of figure all of that out with you. I've got another question. Yeah, it can be. So when so number porting can be delayed if necessary. So when we give you that date, that's not a hard date, right? You've got to actually accept that date. And even if you accept that date, we can reschedule it with, I think it's 48 hours notice after that, it's kind of going ahead, because, all the ducks have been aligned with Telstra and whoever the losing carrier is and whatnot. But if, I don't know, maybe the hardware hasn't arrived in time, or you haven't had enough time to get it everything configured or whatever it might be. COVID may have hit, right? Lockdowns, we can reschedule that up to 48 hours out from that actual cutting port over. Hopefully that answers the question. And our service delivery team, if you just communicate them, so call and just say, hey guys, we need to pause this. We'll then book another time. The windows can reset depending on the complexity of the number, but we'll work with you to communicate all those bits and pieces and get the best outcome for everyone. Cool. Hopefully that answered that. All right, so we're just going to quickly run through our different voice products. Just if you're a new partner or you're a new team member of an existing partner, to understand some of the terminology. I'm going to try and fly through this pretty quickly because I don't really want to make this a sales presentation too much. We have 3 main voice products. We have our multi-tenanted PBX, our VoIP bundles, and our SIP trunks or Teams Direct Routing. They're very, very similar. Multi-tenanted PBX is designed for partners that are a bit more tech savvy. That you get one portal, you can create all your customers, you can charge them different rates, you can control absolutely everything. But it's like the difference between multi-tenanted PBX and VoIP bundles is like buying all of the ingredients for a cake, right? And then making the cake yourself. Whereas VoIP bundles, it's all sort of done for you. We're providing a handset, we're providing the call usage, we're providing the potentially a new phone number, and we even configure the handsets and the system based on your initial or your however you tell us to. So that's kind of, if you think of the cake analogy of going and buying a pre-made cake versus buying the ingredients yourself and making it. SIP trunks, that's if you're going to be connecting an existing phone system or Teams. So I'll quickly run through that. This is all broken out. Whoops. So multi-tenanted, like I said, if you want to white label it, multi-tenanted is the way to go. You do get volume discounts for the extensions and things like that. So the more you buy, the cheaper it gets. There's 3 components of what you get charged for: call usage, extensions, which are like if you have PBX functionality. So I think handsets, IVRs, queues, that sort of stuff. And then the phone numbers, either new phone numbers or the numbers that you port in, right? So 3 particular components. Whereas VoIP bundles, it's more of a plug and play solution. You can go out to site and go, cool, they've got 10 staff, I need 10 handsets, and it's 10 times whatever model that you choose. That includes unlimited mobile and local and national calls. Again, we do the configuration. Now, with all of our unlimited ones, they are designed for, there's a fair use policy for that, and they are designed for particular business types. So they're not designed for call centers. They're not designed for, even medical clinics at the moment with all of the outbound calls that they're doing. They're not designed for that, unfortunately. Our pay-as-you-go products are the way to go. Will the slides be available? And do the bundles include 1-300 numbers? No. Yes, the slides will be available. And no, 1-300 numbers are not included in bundles. They are an add-on for, or an extra service type for each one. And our 1-300 numbers sit off net so that you can redirect them, you can do geo routing and all sorts of stuff. That's kind of outside of this topic, but just know that they are an additional cost. Bundles do include a phone number of the local capital city, of the nearest capital city they're in. But if you want to port in a number, you can do that. You do still pay for the numbers to be ported in. Well, sorry, not the free number porting promotion at the moment, but you do pay for the monthly fee of those numbers. So if it's 100 number range versus $2, a single DID, you're going to be paying anywhere between say $2 to $40 a month for, depending on how many they are.
Just quickly, Ben, I think they meant 1-300 calls outbound. Included.
Oh, sorry. No. So international and 1-300 number calls are not provided. The 1-300 numbers they are legislated, and I think they're at 25 cents per call. So we don't.
Yeah, from memory.
Yeah, we don't put any margin on those. We have to pass it through. Technically, you can put margin on it in the system, but under the ACMA rules, you're not meant to. International calls in the system, we're not going to go through it in a huge amount of detail, but you can set different call margins for mobiles versus, local or, international. You get that granularity control, or you can just pass them through as unlimited. Quickly, SIP trunks, these are going to be used if you've got an old school, I'm going to say old school, PBX, where it either sits on-prem, or less old school ones if you're using something like 3CX. We've got a lot of 3CX partners that, like Heaps and Mitel partners that use our system. And a lot of the 3CX guys even host the 3CX platforms on our public cloud offering as well. So fully compatible with all, anything that supports SIP. And if you're not sure if it's compatible or you want to sort of test it out beforehand, we do offer free trials of SIP trunks so that you can test it out before you sort of jump off the deep end. And then you've got Teams direct routing. Teams direct routing is basically the same as a SIP trunk. All right, it is how you enable Teams to replace your phone system. I won't go into too much detail, but just know that, if you wanted to get rid of your traditional desk phone and, move entirely to Teams, then you can connect Teams to the public telephone network via us. So we do all the talking to Microsoft. We've got all the, redundant links into Microsoft. We can port your existing phone numbers in all in the same way. You can just use Microsoft Teams as your phone system. You support all the Teams piece of that, so we don't touch that. We just facilitate that, the SIP trunk. Dylan, anything else that you're much more of a Teams guru than I am? Anything else you want to add there?
You covered off most of the basics. The only thing we don't provide with the Teams direct routing is licensing.
Yeah, that's a good point. There is a license. You do need it. We have a separate presentation, but do you know the license off the top of your head? Because I can't remember.
It's the phone system license. So the I think it's E1, E3, M1, and M3 licenses don't include it, but the higher ones do. So the top end license for the Microsoft 365 and Office 365 include the phone system license. Whereas if you've, say, got Mailbox only or just got the base license, you can just add the phone system license.
Yeah, okay, cool. All right.
I can't remember how much it is, though.
It makes sense if they're going to, let's say they've already got that premium license, they're already paying for it, so it can save the client a lot of money in that sense. And from our SIP trunks, we have a pay-as-you-go option or unlimited as well. So you can kind of, you can choose what's right for the customer. Cool. Okay, so I think that is basically the last little piece of it. All right, so if you're going to be using our platform is called VoIP Now. It is a fully multi-tenanted platform. If you're using our multi-tenanted option, if you're using VoIP bundles, we do provide you the organization level, but you can provide end user access to this if you so choose, so that they can self-manage it. It's got a full permission system and whatnot that we will cover. It also is white label. You can brand it, you can put your own domain name on it, all of those bits and pieces. So the phones can even register against your SIP domain and things like that. So if you want to sort of brand it and make it your own, you can. Just quickly, Dylan, do you want to run through the high level functionality?
Yeah, so the VoIP Now system comes with all the things you would expect. So your basic phone functions, transfer, hold, forward, and things like that, as well as includes your busy LAN field functionality and some basic reporting in the portal on the call stats. So whether the call failed, how long people are on the phone, things like that. The VoIP Now system itself isn't limiting the amount of functions it can do. It's more based on the actual device you're connecting it to. So if say you get a Yearlink phone and it doesn't support BLF, then you obviously can't use it even though VoIP Now supports it, and then vice versa. The phone might have a bunch of functions that work perfectly fine if it was connected to, say, Yearlink PBX, but if it's going to VoIP Now, it may not work. So you just got to double check some of those things. And it's also got a lot of advanced functions like your IVR. So it's your typical, you call up, press 1 for this, press 2 for that. It does have a lot of interactive options in there and some what's called cold DID based routing. So you can route it to different places depending on what number is called. Your queues, so it drops the call into the queue, rings X amount of people for however long you've configured, and you can have it jump out to another queue and sort of escalate like that. Your conference center extension, which is very similar to things like Zoom and Teams, where you can dial into a conference room, but some people may want something outside of Zoom or Teams, or they might want something they know where it's going to be hosted or where it's going to be routed for security reasons. So you can set up one of those, and it does support some basic call center functionality. Even though the PBX isn't meant for use of call centers, you can still do things like logging agents in and out of queues, which might be good if you do have like a rotating roster of people, or someone might need to log out of the queue because they need to go and work on something without being disturbed. They can do that from the phone as well. And queues tend to provide a little more advanced reporting on things like why someone hung up, which party hung up, what the error was if the call failed to connect, and things like that. But again, a lot of these functions, we're happy to run through it with you on a case-by-case basis as well.
Yeah, we've got next Tuesday we'll be doing a bit more of a technical dive into the actual advanced components of it. So we'll talk about the terminology of our platform and actually run through setting up some scenarios so you get a bit of a feel for it. Again, with our VoIP bundles, you don't really need to worry about it as much. We'll set it up for you. You then get full access to go make any changes that you want, or you can get us to make that change on a do and charge basis. Yeah. So a little bit about the reporting. Now, it's going to give you everything that you would typically expect. Now, because, and I'll just quickly slide back to here, users can log into the platform, right? So you can give them a login with their individual username and password. They could be logging into your domain, and they will actually go into their organization. They'll only see theirs, or you can give them the user-based login, right? So they can only see their phone, right? So if they're a manager, for example, you might want to give them the ability to see their team or the user about seeing their specific reports. And because the system's got things like call report recording and things like that, they can go through and see all the the history of that call. They can download it, all those sort of things. So everything you kind of expect. These days it is sort of I'm going to call it commodity. You expect these functionality, but so there's virtually nothing that I think we come across these days that people ask for that we don't support. But from a reporting perspective anyway, it's everything that, again, you'd expect to see. Like Dylan touched, it's going to be things like, the calls, how many are answered, how many are busy, how many, why did they fail, those sort of things. And then if you do have the agent-based reporting, you can start to see, okay, how many calls is my agent getting through? How quickly are they answering, all of those things. And you can do different, from the queues in our system, you can actually even do advanced functionality where you can say, okay, route them to people that are taking less calls, to give people more of a break in between calls and things like that. There's a lot of advanced of waitings and routing that you can do, and it's all very easy to do. If you want to get creative with this, make it prettier or manipulate the data, we have a full API that you can actually use as well. So we've got a number of partners that have built solutions, click to call, CRM integrations, dashboards, those sort of things that you can pull the data down and manipulate it and things like that, all via the API. So that's just a standard REST API. Virtually any developer these days are usually comfortable working with that too, and it's fully documented. So, Dylan, permissions?
Yep. So touched a little bit on the permissions earlier. When you're giving your customer access to the portal, you may not want them to just have free reign to do whatever they want. So by default, if you leave everything ticked, they can go in things and do things like change caller ID, delete extensions, create extensions. We generally recommend, if you're going to give them access, to restrict it as much as possible to only what they need.
Yeah,
so turning things
like
off,
the receptionist doesn't need the API access, for example.
Yeah, receptionist doesn't need API access. Pretty much anyone at the company, you don't want them to be able to do anything that would change the call flow or even change caller ID, because there are some strict ACMA requirements around that. And you can land in a lot of trouble if you send an invalid caller ID or you impersonate someone else. We haven't had it happen, but it's definitely a
what was
big
it?
fine you want to avoid.
3 months ago, 4 months ago, ACMA introduced. It's not really a law, but it's more of a, an agreed
The best
agreement,
practices.
between all of the different carriers that we all subscribe to, in the sense of saying, okay, we won't do this. So spoofing numbers in that sense is just to avoid the spam, because obviously everyone gets so much. Microsoft is calling because you've got a virus.
Yeah.
It's to avoid that sort of stuff. So turning off those sort of things are worthwhile if they don't understand what they're doing in that sense.
Yeah, but there are a few things you can't disable, which is like accessing call recordings, call logs, and things like that. Those are inherently available to the user or the organization level.
You don't have to turn it on.
Yeah, it's
you don't
already
have to turn on call
available.
recording. If they, and again, you don't have to give them access. It says down the bottom, cell functionality is an add-on. Even though this is meant to be technical, from a productization point of view, if you're managing the service, you should be charging a management fee. The client doesn't necessarily need to log in at all. They don't even need to know that there's a portal. Depends on the approach of how you're actually going to position that to your customer. You might turn around and actually sell certain functionality as an additional add-on, example reporting and things like that. You might add that as a particular line item that we're not charging you for, but you can value add that to your end customer.
Yeah, exactly. One last thing is you can also stop them from doing anything with provisioning devices, because if you leave it on modify, they can go in there and actually remove a device from provisioning, which might break a lot of things if you're using the provisioning a fair amount. Because the system does have a full provisioning engine built into it.
Which I think we cover. I don't have is it the next slide? It is.
Yes.
I guess.
So the system already has a full provisioning engine inside it, but we do recommend using something like the Grandstream Device Management System or the Yearling provisioning system, because even though it's got the provisioning engine in it, it can be a little bit complicated to use, and we do give you templates automatically that have everything that needs to be modified on the phone to work with our system. But for day-to-day management, something like the GDMS, where it's just a GUI, you adjust settings and it pushes down to the phone, it's going to be a lot easier than having to go in and edit XML if they want a slight change. And
I should add there that any of the handsets that you buy from us, they automatically get added into this portal as well, right? So that even if you haven't set it up, reach out to our support and we can actually set your access up to this and give you access to your handsets. Because that way you can actually, Dylan, run through the technical bits and pieces of what you can actually do in the GDMS portal.
Yeah, so using GDMS as an example, because all the different portals are going to be slightly different, you can actually run remote network diagnostics. So if the customer is complaining, hey, I'm having really bad call audio, but no one else is complaining in the office, you can, as you can see in the screenshot, run a network diagnostic, just do basic uplink and downlink, so upload and download speed tests. We'll get latency because maybe there's something wrong with their network port. And that'll sort of give you an idea, as well as we'll Hosted Network personally, if there's an issue we're helping you troubleshoot, we'll use the capture trace or the syslog tool to get detailed logs off the phone on what it's doing. So that way we can immediately go, okay, it's doing this, it's not supposed to, let's go change some settings. It also helps with just doing a trace route in general. So if it, for whatever reason, isn't registering, you can do a ping to the VoIP server. All through the GDMS, you don't need to contact the staff member. You can even
don't have to log into the computer.
Yes, and you can even update the firmware and reboot it through this. So, and it's all built into the Grandstream phones. The GXP series phones do support this, so the GXP 2000 series support it. Unfortunately, the GXP 1700 series don't, but the 2000 series is a setting you need to enable, whereas the new phones that we're selling, the GRP 2615 and 2613, it's already enabled natively. In fact, I don't believe you can disable it, but it allows you to just immediately pop it in here without doing anything on the phone. So
all of our, back in the beginning of the year, we shifted our handsets to the these new ones specifically for this functionality. Because again, like if you don't have to log into someone's computer to, troubleshoot something, you're going to be able to get, have a better experience yourself, but you're going to be able to support your customer better, and you're going to be able to save time and money. From say the GDMS portal, you can, if the customer wants an extra BLF key, you can configure it from there. You don't have to log into their computer and log into the web interface of a phone, or fart ass around with XML templates and things like that. You can just kind of do it from there. Away they go, and you can move them between customers and whatnot as well for easier management. So
yeah, so if a customer returns a phone, you can easily assign it to another customer.
Yeah. So, and again, we add all of our phones that we deploy into that for you. So if you've got, if you placed orders and you've got handsets and you're not using that, I believe it's in our SCA that you can get access to it, service completion advice, but not everyone reads them because there's always a lot of information there. So yeah, just reach out to our support and we'll run you through the process of getting access to that. And like it says on the bottom, like this call, we're happy to do one-on-one training with you to actually, make sure that you're getting the most out of those tools so that you can support your customers as best as possible. At the end of the day, your success is our success, right? So that's why we do these sort of things. We want you to, be confident. We want you to be able to support your customer as best as possible.
And like I said, GDMS isn't the only one. Yealink have their own portal. I believe Cisco and that have theirs as well, but
Yeah,
they're all going to have different flavors of how they do things.
I think we've got I'm going to flick through. Yeah, so here we go. I'll just cover the supported handsets and we'll jump back. So we primarily, with the solutions that we provide, we're happy to support Yealink and Grandstream. Grandstream are what we provide. We can provide Yealink as well, but our Grandstream is our day-to-day handset that we provide. So if we're designing solutions, that's what we go down. However, SIP compatible, anything, whether it be SNOM, Cisco, Polycom, they're all compatible so long as they support SIP, right? Like it says down the bottom there, I'm going to just like highlight that in red. It is always recommended. Test beforehand. So if you're going to go, if you are and your team are already trained up on a particular handset model or brand, it's not for us to tell you to shift over. By all means, just test it beforehand. And if there's any issues, by all means, reach out to our team and we're happy to work with you guys to make sure that we resolve any of those. But it's pretty rare these days. They all use SIP, as the underlying protocol. So like Dylan touched on earlier, so long as the phone supports the features that the PBX supports, like BLF, things like that, then it's happy days.
Yep. And the other thing to keep in mind is there are some models of phones that quote unquote support SIP, but they don't actually work with external VoIP servers. They support SIP to a PBX on site only.
Yeah, so and that's I guess the
Cisco and Polycom.
Yeah, and some of them can be reflashed to support SIP. We're really getting out of the the realm of our support there, but we can give you general guidance if we've experienced it before. So if you do, I know some of the older Cisco handsets, they do support their proprietary protocols with the Cisco unified comm system. They have their own proprietary protocols, not SIP, but some of them. Right, some of them can be reflashed to support SIP, but again, that's kind of like well and truly out of the realms of this conversation. So I will jump back a couple of slides. Hang on.
We just had a question. Is there any SBC?
We're effectively providing the SBC as part of our solution. Right,
so the VoIP
SBC is a session border controller. Think of it like a firewall/router for VoIP or voice. It's built into our solution. So all of our solutions, you don't need an SBC for. Any other technical bits that I'm missing there, Dylan?
No, that's about right.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, typically if you wanted to use your own SBC, you would just get a SIP trunk and connect it with that. Because you can connect another SBC and do multiple layers without a problem. Yeah,
so and we do have partners that build their own voice offerings based off us. They'll buy SIP trunks from us and then multi-tenant and downstream. You can't do that with our unlimited products, but there's nothing stopping you doing that with your pay-as-you-go products. So yeah. All right, so rebilling. These screenshots are now out of date. Meryl, I'm sorry, I didn't update them. I said I would, and I didn't.
I was
Um,
actually looking at the screen going, naughty Ben. That's all right.
So we've actually got our beta testing for version 2 of our portal comes out next week. So if you registered as a beta tester, you'll get access to that, and that'll go live probably at the end of August, like mainstream to all partners. What our rebilling system allows you to do is, like it says in the name, is rebill. All right, so it allows you to comply with all of your ACMA obligations and give your end customer a nice branded invoice in your name, with your logo, with your payment details, with all of your margins, all of those bits and pieces, and it will, either you can schedule it to send to your customer automatically, or you can download them and send them. Now, on top of that, it integrates with everything. Well, not everything. That's a big statement there. It integrates with accounting packages like Xero, right? So you don't have to do any admin work. But because we focus, our target market is MSPs, we were an MSP, we understand the pain points that, selling these auxiliary services like VoIP have. We also integrate with the ConnectWise and AutoTask, all right? So we will sync all these items into your ConnectWise agreements or your AutoTask contracts, right? And and that doesn't just go for the monthly recurring items. If you're going for pay as you go, that'll also sync all of the call usage, right? So you send out your AutoTask or your ConnectWise invoice, then you're going to get the call usage added onto that as well. Now, the current version, or what we're calling the legacy version, just does voice. By the end of the month, we will support all of our services, right? So that includes internet, that includes anything that we offer, you can add onto the invoice. And you get some advanced functionality in there that you can actually, like if you want to give a full breakdown of all the call usage, you can, or you can summarize it. So you get a lot of flexibility with the tool. We're going to be having some upcoming, I think there was a blog post a couple of weeks ago which has some details about that, and I think you can sign up for beta access from there if you want to get early access to that. But that'll be going live, version 2 of that, with all of the bells and whistles by the end of August. So yeah, it's one of the unique pieces of being a hosted network partner. We don't charge for that. We're not putting an extra percentage on there like some providers do to use their third party or use their tools like this. It's it's literally there because our partners, one of the headaches are that manual rebilling of services, or forgetting to even bill it. I've seen time and time again where a VoIP bundle, they added an extra VoIP bundle and it forgot to get billed. Whereas in this case, if we bill you for an extra bundle, it's going to go and update your AutoTask contract, or it's going to update your Xero invoice or whatnot. And if there's other integrations that you want to see or features, like always with anything with we do at Hosted Network, everything is driven off partner feedback. So we're happy to consider that and add it into the roadmap. So anyway, further details will be coming out about version 2. So stay tuned for that. Cool. All right, so white label, we touched on this briefly. You can fully brand our VoIP Now portal. All right, so if you want to give access to your customer, you can. By default, it is gray labeled. There is no mention of Hosted Network whatsoever. Remember that we don't sell direct in any way, shape, or form to end customers. Your customers are yours and yours alone. They won't see Hosted Network on there, but you can brand it at no additional cost with your charge. I'm sorry, question came through and I started reading it, with your colors or your logo. If you want to add your own domain name in there to register handsets and things like that against it, there is a once-off charge of $350 because we have to regenerate and reconfigure the web services and regenerate the SSL for that. Anything else there, Dylan?
No, that's pretty much everything.
All right, so we've got another question. If we are using a SIP trunk with our own PBX, will the rebilling give us the required breakdown? Yes, it will. If you purchase a SIP trunk from us, so long as it's a one-to-one relationship with your end customer, if you've got your own PBX and you're splitting that out, further down the line from us using a pay-as-you-go SIP trunk? No, it's not, because we can't tell what calls for what customer. But if you've got one SIP trunk per customer, which is what 99% of our partners would do, you would map that service with us to an end customer, and then it will pull in all the margins that you configure in VoIP now. And you can add in any other auxiliary items in there, such as, you might add once-off charges in there for handsets and things. You can add them into our portal, or you can add them directly into your own PSA like ConnectWise or Autotask. You can also add custom recurring items in there. I hope that answers your question. Cool. Okay, so we're bouncing around a little bit. Oh, hang on. I'm just going to go back to the rebilling just to while this slide's relevant. Cool. So it's one-to-one. Yeah. So if it's a one-to-one relationship between a SIP trunk and a PBX, like if you're spinning up a 3CX instance per customer, our rebilling system is perfect for something like that. It could be Mitel, it could be whatever it is downstream. It could be Microsoft Teams, whatever it is. Our unlimited products, they're only unlimited for mobile, local and national calls. They're not unlimited for your international calls. So there can be, depending on, you can block them in our system, you can disable that entirely, but most people don't, and so there can occasionally be small amounts of calls that they make. Maybe it could be a large amount, even if it is an unlimited product. Right now, that's admin time for you to bill that every month, and it could be $2. It could actually cost you more to bill $2 than the actual $2 itself. Right, that's where the rebilling system just comes in really, really helpful. So, by all means, set it up. There's no cost to it. We're happy to run you through it and go. Another question here. Dylan, that might be one for you from Ray.
Yes. So the numbers format is still technically in the Australian format. It's just formatted in 2 digits, 3 digits, and 5. That is still recognized in Australian format. It's just displayed that way in the phone system. We are looking into changing it, but because it is a multi-tenant platform, it does impact a lot of people. So we need to make sure that changing that's not going to actually break anything. It's just, again, because it's multi-tenanted, we got to be very careful with the things we change, as well as need to make sure it doesn't impact anything with the rebilling system. But I believe the rebilling system displays numbers without any spaces or dashes anyway.
The legacy one looks like it does from that screenshot. The version 2, I'm not sure if there's formatting on there or not.
Okay, I'll have to double check that, but that is something we're taking into consideration and looking at changing.
Okay, so we've covered the supported handsets, so we'll sort of continue on from there. So the next common question is, like, do we even support soft phones? Yes, we support soft phones. Anything that supports SIP, just like the handsets, right? So I'm going to draw on my screen again. I love using the annotate feature. SIP, if it supports SIP, then it supports, our platform will support it. So the recommended ones that we typically use, GS Wave, that's a Grandstream one. It's free. It's available for Android and iPhone. There's no cost to it, but I guess you kind of get what you pay for. It's come a long way, and I know a number of partners that use it. Xlite, if you're after a free one for like Windows or Mac, Xlite is a very common one. They have a paid version as well. I can't remember what it's called. The one that we tend to use is actually for if you've got an Android phone, holding up my phone if it'll work. The Android has built-in SIP compatible, right? So you can actually receive calls on your SIP number, right, directly on your mobile, and you can also make them as well. Really handy. I personally love that feature because I don't have to have another app on my phone. The downside of it is that you don't get the advanced functionality like transfer, hold, all of those. If your phone supports it, like hold, it will, but it won't have the transfer options. If you're after like all of the bells and whistles, Zoiper is our recommended option. Most partners use that. A lot of our team use that as well, especially working from home. I think it works out to be about €40 per license. And yeah, now Dylan, there are a couple of considerations with soft phones though. Can you run through some of those?
So it's more of a bigger issue on iPhones than it is on Androids. That a lot of soft phones will just deregister if they're sitting idle in the background because the battery saving algorithms are too aggressive. On iPhones, it's a particular problem, and a lot of our partners have encountered where they'll just lock the phone and it'll immediately deregister because the iPhone's killing the background process, essentially. Most of the time, depending on the version of iOS, you can go in and disable that or make it so it's not as aggressive. And other times you might need to purchase an add-on that enables certain functions like the push notifications, because that forces the application to stay open in the background, even if iPhone's trying to kill it.
And Zopa
Android
gets around that, right?
Yeah, that's with that extra add-on.
Right, okay.
Androids don't have that problem as much because they already have that built-in SIP compatibility. So
it's a bit more native.
Yeah, it's a bit more native, so it's not as big of a problem. It can still be a problem on, say, some of the Huawei devices where their AI built in for battery saving can close it off, but they allow you to sort of bypass that a lot easier.
Android, right? Much less lockdown than the iPhone.
Yeah, so that's not so much of an issue for Windows and Mac, but the only other issue is if you're on the phone and it switches from Wi-Fi to 4G or vice versa, the call will drop out because it's where the IP is changing. So it's got to re-register, go to a new location. That's just one thing to keep in mind. So if you're on the phone, probably best not to like walk out the front door and get in the car because it will drop out.
I've done that many times. Now that's a similar thing even with like failover connection. So if you've got a business set up where like SD-WAN, our SD-WAN product gets around this because we cater specifically to things like voice, but most SD-WAN solutions like Meraki, Cisco, Fortinet, they won't maintain that SIP session. So the call will drop and they'll have to recall back. So just be aware of that, because the IP address is effectively changing.
Yeah, those are the biggest ones that you would most commonly encounter.
All right. Okay. So we basically are at the end of our first session, but we have a number of these up and coming. So on our website, there you can see at the bottom here, hostednetwork.com.au/events. You'll see all of our various events. Now, these aren't just technical or events. We've also got, so next week on Tuesday, we've got a session with a number of different partners about tackling growing pains at different size MSPs, all about operational maturity. And that series is called MSPs in Conversation. Then on Thursday, funny, these are in the wrong way. Then on Thursday, we've also got the next VoIP session. Oh, sorry, never mind. I'm looking. It's nearly Friday. The VoIP deep dive, and that's where we're going to actually get into the actual portals and start running through some of the configuration settings and things like that. So if you've got things that you want to send your text to and whatnot, that is another really good session. Following from that, we'll continue and jump into some of our IaaS offerings and how we differentiate, and using the actual platforms, backups, all those sort of fun things. And then we've got our next session of MSPs in Conversation. Check out the events page. Once COVID lockdown ends, we've also got a number of different events. Any of our existing partners on here will know that pre-COVID, we have historically done a lot of different events, usually, whether it be pizza and beer, but we've also got a whole bunch of other ones up and coming as well. So we've got, so I won't spoil them because Meryl will probably kill me, but keep an eye on the events page because you'll see all the in-person events. And let's just say they're not just your boring old presentations. So that'll be exciting. Cool. If there's anything else that you want to ask, even if it's, how do I do this? How do I do that? Feel free to ask. Dylan and I are happy to stay on for a bit. Otherwise, thank you for attending and enjoy the rest of your day. We'll stick around for a couple of minutes.
Just while we wait for any questions that come in, I'll be sending a wrap-up email to those that have registered with the registration for next week's VoIP deep dive, and also some of the resources that we spoke about today, some resources and templates that you guys can use to give to your own customers.
Cool. Thank you. What security features are built into the PBX? All right. So, Dylan, do you want to tackle that?
Yeah. So the most common ones that you might want to look at enabling is the PBX itself does support encrypted traffic. So it's very much going to depend on the end device, though, to make sure it supports the same type as VoIP now. So you can set up I think it's SRTP and TLS to encrypt the traffic. It also supports IP lockdown, sorry. So you can set it so that it will only receive registrations from a specific IP, or for SIP trunks, you can do it to the point where it'll accept anything from that WAN IP, but anywhere else, it'll just drop the traffic straight away. So VoIP now supports that natively.
And in addition, because we are a licensed carrier, we are an NBN provider, and we provide extensive ISP offerings. So we're a lot of our bread and butter is designing network solutions and tying them into voice, so we can keep voice network on net effectively. So if you've got say multi-sites or even a single site, we can connect that layer 2 back into our voice offerings, so we can secure it that way as well. In addition, I'm just going to cover fraud. From fraud, because SIP over the years, has had it has had issues of getting hacked. We do have your standard, secure passwords and all of that, but we've also got spend limits that you can configure, right? So you can turn around to each customer and say, okay, if it's pay as you go, you're only allowed to spend, say, I don't know, $200 a month on call usage. Right, so that way they're never going to get a bill, and then you can add additional credit if you need to as you go.
Yep. So I would definitely recommend, for say if you had an unlimited SIP trunk, set up that call limit, because if it is suddenly, a lot of the time with fraud, it's international calls.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
if you set a call limit to say $200 and they do get hacked and start making outbound calls, at least it's only going to be $200 bill.
Yeah,
we've had
do
situations.
Have prevention. Well, you run through the situation. So yeah.
We've had multiple situations where someone's gotten hacked and they've not noticed for 2 or 3 days, or we have noticed immediately, but it's, say, taken an hour, and we essentially block the traffic. We would usually just block the extension and then let you guys know so you don't keep racking up calls. But even an hour can easily equate to thousands and thousands of dollars. I think the biggest one we had was a 9 or 10 grand or something.
I've seen various over the years. I think my largest one was 107 that I saw. This was many years ago, and that was actually pre-Hosted Network. But I think the largest I've seen at Hosted Network is 27. Now that one is a good particular use case, because it was a pay-as-you-go SIP trunk, all right, or SIP trunks. And it was one of the major providers that support and sell NEC phone systems. And when that happened, the NEC manufacturer password got leaked, right? So overnight, we had hundreds of NEC on-prem phone systems that got breached, right? So it wasn't, and it was widespread, right? So even though we've got triggers in our system, and we've added a lot more since then, it was because it was so widespread. It was here and services here, a couple $100 here, $50 here, and it added up very quickly. So that was a bit of a painful one, especially for NEC. Most cyber insurance these days covers toll fraud as well. All right. So just be aware of that. It's always good to consider that. Now, we also have certain preventions in place that stop that, right? So we've got certain triggers and alerts from our own side, but we also do additional layers of protection, and we call it Project Guardian internally. And we don't put it on our website, but what we do is we actually honeypot a whole bunch of things, right? And we monitor for anyone that is trying to hit our voice servers or hit particular servers, and we block those connections globally across our entire network, right? So in every single POP around the country, we block them at the edge of our network. So if we detect fraudulent activities on, that's targeting, I don't know, it could be an NBN connection, if it matches certain criteria, voice we are much stricter with, we block it at the edge of our border, right, to protect all of our customers. Now, we're one of the few people that really do that. So if effectively, you know, for voice, if they're trying to hit the server with different usernames and passwords, if they're, you know, if they're hitting particular criteria, they're blocked, right? And then, you know, we prefer to do that, and then we whitelist or we unblock than, you know, racking up a lot. Can you say how many times of these fraud protections work in? Well, it's a global thing from a fraud protection perspective, right? So the spending limits are per client, right? So if you've got a SIP trunk, you can set that SIP trunk to say, okay, I only want them to ever rack up $500. Maybe you know they're a 10-man band and they're just never going to spend any more than that. And so you can protect it in that sense on a per customer basis. But you can, if you've got a multi-tenant PBX, you can do that per organization. You can do, and we can set certain spend limits on your account as well. So if you want to sort of, and we do that by default, right? So we'll increment you up regardless. But you know, if you're a new partner, it's going to be lower. You'll 99% of the time you'll never even notice it because most people never hit it. You know, we'll always increment that. You know, and if it's getting high, we'll check the traffic and whatnot ahead of time. So.
And we just had one other question about blocking premium destinations easily. With all of the extensions and SIP trunks, you have the option for outbound routing to block outbound calls based on a prefix or a number. So if you wanted to block calls to international, which is something we definitely recommend doing, by default is just blocking international calls. Because if the customer doesn't need it, then that's immediately going to mitigate most of the toll fraud if they do get exposed.
Yeah, the one I remember, the NEC one, for example, was all to Cuba.
Yeah.
Don't know. It was calling what they call calling card toll fraud, which is typically the most common one. But yeah, all to Cuba. So you know, and there are, you know, if we see, or even if our upstream, you know, if particular providers, if they see, like if Telstra see certain things happening, they will occasionally get blocked as well. You know, so if there's certain things, so there's multiple layers. But I guess the key thing here is you want to be careful regardless. You know, set those spend limits. You know, use IP lockdown. Don't use just username and password. You know, IP lock it down. Use TLS. Use SRTP. Firmware update your handsets, because if your handsets, you know, don't get firmware upgraded, you know, periodically, it's just like the exchange issue recently. You know, they become a target. So.
So just had a question about
Thanks,
if you've got two trunks, a pay-as-you-go and an unlimited, can you rewrite the DID when dialing out? So if you have in a situation where you have two SIP trunks, a pay-as-you-go and an unlimited connecting back to one PBX, both of those will follow the details that you provide from your PBX. So if you route a call out through both, you can use the same caller ID. As long as you own the caller ID on one of them, and if need be, can provide proof, which 90% of the time we can because you've got an account with us that has the DID on it, you can use the same caller ID on both without a problem. The only time caller IDs become problems is if you're trying to do an anonymous call. Because with the recent changes about 3 months ago that ACMA made, that Ben mentioned earlier in the webinar, you still have to have a DID assigned to the SIM trunk, at least one, so that it can pass through what's called the P-asserted identity header, because they now require that so that if you make an anonymous call, they can still track it back. And that's mostly for emergency services, because the amount of people that call anonymously to emergency services and not get the address, they don't know where you are. So, but yes, to answer your question, you can call out through two different trunks with the same caller ID if they're coming from the same destination or source.
Does the portal have, that's a good question, actually. We currently don't support 2FA on the portal itself, but we will check with the vendor of the portal that actually, and find out where that's at. Make a note of that, Dylan. That's a good question.
I've already got a feature requested because it's something I requested.
Cool. Oh, well, there you go. And
So
we'll see if
it's
we can
just
get a timeline.
Yeah, I'll reach out to them again and ask. There's one new message.
Thanks, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day.
All right,
See if
thanks
people
everyone.
are dropping off. Looks like that is the last of the questions. I'll just give it a second. All right, well, let's wrap it up there. Thanks, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you next time.
See you guys. See you next
See
time.
ya.
Bye.
Bye.